for our BEAD grant application. And so primarily what we are going to focus on here, just obviously answering any questions you may have. It is possible that there might be a question we might have to get back to you on, or if it is something that we think that generally it could be something kind of for the good of the group and good of kind of all of the applicants involved, we will potentially create a new frequently asked question addressing the particular item, so that way there's kind of specific guidance in writing. And we are also recording each of the office hour sessions, and we'll be posting those online on our website, so that way if there's anything you want to go back and reference, that way there's also that opportunity as well. So with that, this obviously will be, a very informal session. We'll go ahead and open the floor for questions, and please feel free to either drop them in the chat or come off of mute and ask us any questions you may have about the process.
The floor is open.
The floor is open.
Okay. My name is Brady Buckner. I'm the president of the American Innovation and Opportunity Fund. And we have a digital equity program that we're looking to run in several states, Georgia being one of them. We've done a lot of work in poor and underserved communities down there. And I just wanted to join the office hours to kind of see what other people were thinking, maybe some things that aren't in all of the guidelines and regulations that trip people up. We've done grants, but there's always, no matter what you do, the grants are always a little different. And I just really want to do a good job because, the communities we support, they really need this. And so I don't want to make a bonehead mistake. And I don't know how else to put it. So that's why I'm here. And I thank you very much for taking the time to do these office hour calls.
Absolutely. Well, we want to make sure we're a good resource and answer any questions you may have. Just to clarify, are you interested in planning or applying for the BEAD grant that's currently open, that's to serve unserved and underserved locations in community anchor institutions, or are you planning to apply for the state digital equity capacity grant when that opens as well?
I believe it's the former, but we're not opposed to that one. I don't quite understand the latter as much. And so I want to be careful about saying, oh yeah, we're going to apply for them all, when I want to make sure our organization, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We do programs in not exclusively, but it just worked out in minority communities, primarily African American, although some Hispanic. And so the grant, and correct me if I'm wrong, this grant is the grants that were just awarded by the NTIA as part of the overall process. And these grants are for not putting fiber in the ground, but helping communities to learn how to access the resources that are available. You guys have a wealth of resources, and the communities we're in, they have no idea. So we've worked really hard. We did an ACP grant through the NTIA, the Affordable Connectivity Program, and helped a lot of people get signed up. And unfortunately, they ended that. So we're hoping that this grant, if we get it, will help us continue that work.
So I think you're referring more to the state digital equity capacity grant that the state was approved a few weeks ago for roughly about $22.5 million. So the BEAD grant is a $1.3 billion grant, primarily for infrastructure. First, we have to use the funding to get to all remaining unserved locations, underserved locations, and community anchor institutions that were essentially that came out of our challenge process. And so there's roughly about 165,000 unserved and underserved locations in addition to the community anchor institutions that, based on the statute, we have to use this funding first to build the infrastructure to. And then ultimately, if we have any funding left over, there is the ability for us to look at non-deployment projects which could be focused around digital connectivity and literacy. Based on our approved volume 2, we do have a number of items that we said that we would look at. Given once we run the infrastructure side of the grant, knowing how much funding might be available. However, we did recently get approved for the State Digital Equity Capacity Grant, which is, I think, more so probably what you're referring to. And we are looking at putting kind of all of our program requirements together in our notice of funding opportunity right now for that. But right now, it's just the infrastructure side of the grant that is open.
Okay, then I look like a fool, but that's okay. It's a
No,
routine
I was
thing
gonna
for me.
say we get questions all the time about that. So
Yeah.
please, that's why we want to do office hours. We want to provide clarification as much as we can. And it is something with the programs kind of being announced at similar times and kind of running in generally kind of similar timelines. We did somewhat expect there to potentially be some confusion related to the two grants. Again,
Okay.
this one is more primarily internet service providers applying to serve these locations, and then ultimately we might have later rounds that might focus more on digital connectivity. However, for the State Digital Equity Capacity Grant that we'll be rolling out materials soon for, that's just going to be for nonprofits and local governments to apply for. So kind of different groups generally that we will probably be seeing apply for those grants.
Okay, this is good information, and I apologize to everyone on the
No
call.
worries.
I'll drop because I have a shovel, but I can't lay fiber out in the
I was
country.
gonna say we get these questions all the time. That's we're very excited to hear that you're excited about the program, and obviously we're very much looking forward to rolling out the next grant as soon as we get all of our materials and application ready for the State Digital Equity Capacity Grant. So very, very excited to know that there's a great deal of interest for that as well. So.
Okay, Jessica, thank you so much. I'll see you around.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
There is a question in the chat
Yeah.
on the technical capabilities too, Jack, and
Mhm.
I don't recall if that's the only section, but
Yes, I'm looking at it now. I believe the question is upload network design and diagrams using shapefiles that display fiber routes, interconnect points, and required right-of-way usage. I'm going to get a confirmation on this from Mitch, but I'm going to say that proposed interconnect points are points within the network where you are connecting out to another network. So key points in your network. But let me check with our engineer if I can get a better answer.
And we
Just
can
want to
provide
respond to
clarification
that.
on that as well.
Yeah. So Jessica, what would you say on that?
I believe that's the only place that we're asking for shape files, but again, that is certainly something that we can get a specific answer from our technical team and add that as an FAQ.
Yeah, I think the reason I asked that was just for interconnect points, if it's a point and they want an actual point data source, that's another shape file because it's not going to be the same as a line that indicates the network
The
infrastructure.
boundary, yeah.
Got it.
Thank you.
We will clarify that. Thank you. Are there any other questions? It looks
Yeah, can I
like
ask a
Diana has
question?
her hand up.
Yes, hi, sorry, I can't figure out how to unraise it, but I do have a question. Sorry, hi, Diana Gray from Cox Communications. I'm working through our application right now, and one thing that we do need is a written confidentiality statement in order to provide our financials. And I've looked through the site and the application, and I haven't seen anything written down indicating that. We just have to provide it to our CFO in order to share them. If there's anything that you're able to provide. Other states have been able to have their lawyers just draft like a small statement that they've added to their website or the application so that we can share that.
We can take a look at that at the end of the application. If you've seen it, we do have a trade secret affidavit where essentially you can mark any like particular sections of the application as confidential and proprietary. That way it would, again, if it does qualify for a trade secret, then that way it's exempt from open records. Has your legal team had a chance to look at that, and is that sufficient?
I have not sent that to them. I haven't
Okay.
made it all the way
It's
to
at
the
the
bottom
very
yet,
end
but
of the
I will
application.
share that with them and see if that's sufficient.
Yeah, you should just be able to jump to the end, download it, and
Do you know
send
which
it to your
one
team.
that is? I'm looking at it. The other information trade secret affidavit.
Yes.
If any of the responses in this application contain information or data. Okay, interesting. All right, I'll send that to them. We haven't seen that yet.
If there are any concerns or follow-ups once the team has had a chance to look at that, please just let us know. Again, generally what we've always done for our applications in the past has been the trade secret affidavit, just because obviously that is generally the mechanism that we have in state law here in Georgia to mark things as proprietary and confidential, just because without this, if something is just marked proprietary and confidential, that really we still have to obviously make sure that we're properly responding to open records. And so this is really the best mechanism that we've used in the past for our applications. But if there are any additional concerns, please just let us know and we'll be happy to work with y'all to address that.
Great, thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
I have a question. That's okay.
Sure.
Jason, can you talk a little bit about how granular we need to get on the, is it called the project cost sheet? Like, give us some examples of what you're looking for there. Probably not X per mile of aerial construction, but something else besides that, or is that acceptable?
Jen, do you and David want to take that one?
I can come off mute. David, you might have more to add. I mean, I don't think we put anything in the guidance as to how granular. I think as granular as you can get. And I think we've talked offline with some providers too about, you know, project costs and not having, you know, exact costs per locations, but as granular as you can get with as much detail as you can provide, given the design of your plan for the project areas.
Okay. Second question, if I can ask it, on the non-service template, is there going to be an upload? Like, are we going to upload evidence? Are we just going to have a file of evidence if it's needed? How the spreadsheet just has type of evidence, but like, will there be, we just going to send a big, huge email with a bunch of uploads or attachments? How are we going to do that?
That is our plan. If you'll send the template in just so that we have the structured data, because ultimately the reason why we structured our template the way that we did is if you obviously see the guidance and kind of reason codes and everything, those were developed by NTIA. And so ultimately we want to have the structured data for those locations so that when we in turn have, as the state, have to report those locations, once we've substantiated if those locations should come out of the grant eligible data set or not, we just want to go ahead and already have that in the format that it needs to be reported in our final proposal to NTIA. However, we obviously do need to see, based on the guidance, one of those pieces of acceptable evidence. And so we'll certainly be happy to work with you. We're expecting that a lot of these are going to be more so one-off locations. While we want to make sure that we're taking anything out of eligibility that certainly should not be eligible, whether that is because it's a hay bale or a barn, or really should not be included in the fabric. Also kind of NTIA's more informal guidance on this is the goal of this is not to essentially try to knock out an entire project area saying that the entire project area is already served. And so, obviously that if that is the case, we'll certainly look at the evidence. But the thought of this more so is to, continue to clean up locations in the true up where, obviously the state trued up to the latest version of the FCC map, but there were kind of a few locations, roughly about 3,000 statewide, where ultimately they were added in, where it was added into the fabric where people did not have the opportunity to challenge those locations. And so ultimately, we feel this process that NTIA has rolled out ultimately helps address the fact that, essentially it gives that opportunity so that there is not this kind of delta of locations that were added that weren't able to be challenged. But if it is a larger number of locations, we're certainly happy to work with y'all for the individual pieces of evidence if we need to ultimately, use our SFTP or something like that. If it really is, larger packages of evidence to go along with the locations, we're certainly happy to work with you on that.
It's not that many. I've just got about, I don't know, 20 or so. And so I went in and like printed off all the parcel IDs on the assessor sites that show there's no structures on the ones that have no structures. And then the ones we're looking at don't have commercial power. So I'm getting a statement from our power company to also say, hey, we're confirming these locations are not served with commercial power or whatnot. So anyway, I'll send you something. You can let me know if you need something else. We'll go from there.
Sounds great. Yeah. So essentially the way that the process is going to work is NTIA has left a lot of this up to the states. So while they've put out kind of what they're willing to accept of locations being removed and for the reason codes, ultimately the evidence and, ultimately the final answer of is it substantiated or not lies with the state. And so we also are not turning in our evidence to NTIA the same way that we didn't turn in evidence for the challenge process. But it is something that we have to maintain all of that evidence just upon audit, that we have to be able to produce it. And so that's just something that, again, that's why it's a little disjointed. If we want the structured data so that we already have it in an easy format to be able to include in our final proposal, but then we will maintain all of the evidence on our side so that we're ready for whenever NTIA asks to see it. So.
Okay, thanks.
Greetings. I have a question.
Sure.
Sorry, my camera isn't on. I'm looking a little
no
crazy
worries.
at my desk. So when you guys are referencing that you have to have a company that can match funding, does this company have to be a nonprofit as well? Is that okay for that company to be a for-profit? And is there any specific paperwork that you're requiring from that company?
Related to the 25% match requirement, so the match is eligible to come from various sources. A match can come from a local government, a match can come from a for-profit, a nonprofit. The match can come from other federal funds, specific other federal funds that we have included in our FAQs that were actually outlined in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Not all federal funds are eligible as acceptable match, but there are a few funds that are. And so we do outline those in the FAQs and also in our previous 2 webinars. But the matching funds to get to the 25% match requirement can generally come from most sources, whether again it's a local government, a nonprofit, a for-profit internet service provider, and ultimately, obviously, throughout the process and all of kind of the gating questions and criteria, we want to make sure that obviously that those funds are available and do exist, but there are a number of different sources that the funding can come from.
Okay, and so you said that it actually can come from an internet service provider, for sure. And with the in that document, does it outline what funding is eligible? Because, like for instance, we do have programs with our local governments, but that particular local government is not in a rural area, but some of the participants that are part of the program would be coming from rural areas. And so I don't know if that's like a gray area, but how would that work?
Sure. So for the BEAD grant, the goal of this grant, first for the infrastructure side of the dollars, is that we have to get to all remaining unserved, underserved locations and community anchor institutions before we can look to use the money for what NTIA is deemed as a non-deployment expense. And so right now, this is just obviously the infrastructure side of the grant. And so ultimately, in most cases, the internet service provider will end up owning the network that they're bidding on. And so generally what we've seen with our grants is obviously, they often put in matching funds because they will own the network in the end. If you're talking about a different type of program with the local government, there also is the state digital equity capacity grant that we will be rolling out shortly, but we're still working on getting all of our materials together for that with the notice of funding opportunity and our grant application. But right now, just for the infrastructure side of the grant, there is the 25% match requirement. Again, the match can come from the various sources that I've kind of generally already spoken to and that we also outline in the FAQs. And so hopefully, does that answer your question?
It does. My last question is, does the nonprofit have to be like, what if we serve, because we service different counties, and so do we have to be home based in the area that we're serving and applying for?
So are you talking about applying for the infrastructure side of the grant, or are you thinking about applying for the state digital equity capacity grant? Because there are different rules. So for the infrastructure side of the grant, there is not a requirement of where the organization is based. For the state digital equity capacity grant, team, correct me if I'm wrong, but that it needs to be a Georgia-based nonprofit. But again, the state digital equity capacity grant is not currently open. We are again preparing the materials for that. And so again, there is a requirement of where the organization is located for that grant. But again, for the infrastructure dollars to build to unserved and underserved and community anchor institutions from, the infrastructure side of locations, there is not a requirement where the organization would be based.
So we are based out of Georgia, period. But so you're saying as long as just for clarity, as long as we are a Georgia-based nonprofit organization servicing a Georgia area, we're fine. We just couldn't be like an Indiana nonprofit servicing a Georgia nonprofit. Is that correct?
Again, so if you're planning to apply on the infrastructure side of things,
yes, for the
it is not a concern where the organization or the nonprofit would be based. For the state digital equity capacity grant, which is not going to be for infrastructure, but that's going to be for nonprofits and local governments, bolstering capacity and digital connectivity programs and potentially devices. That is where the organization would have to be located in the state of Georgia.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Sorry for all the questions, guys.
No worries. That's why we're doing this.
I appreciate it.
Do we have any other questions?
Sorry, just one last note.
Yes.
And I know for some reason I'm all dark. Sorry. When you're going through the document, there are a number of places where it says like review link, and it's missing the links in the document. And that might just be because the one that's posted on the portal is still a draft version. But someone might. Are you
referring to the technical assistance manual?
The Georgia BEAD application questions document that's listed on the Georgia BEAD
so again,
program website.
That is something that we're happy to update, but again, that was something that we put out weeks in advance of the actual portal opening, just as a tool for potential applicants to start gathering all of their materials.
So was ultimately the portal now, though, different from that document?
It's possible that they're slightly different based on just consolidation of a couple of questions throughout the process. However, they generally do align. Again, that was kind of a draft set of application questions that were put out weeks ago to kind of help applicants start gathering
Okay.
everything in advance of the portal. But now that the portal is open,
Yeah.
again, that's more so just that was
You-
kind of
You
helping people
might
before
want to
the
think
portal
about
was
just
open.
adding a note for that because most of us have to pull all the questions down to compile the responses first before we can go into the application and include all the responses. Like I can't just do it live. So maybe if you just make a note on there, I don't know, because we'll log into the application if it's different, that's challenging.
We're happy to do that.
Jessica, I do want to add too that you can download the application as well.
When you
So
log
all-
into the portal?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I haven't checked it yet. I would imagine the links would appear in that, but I have not checked that. So you might have the same issue. But again, you would at least see all the questions.
Okay, cool. I will go into the portal and align. Thank you.
Also trying to check the chat here, make sure we haven't missed any other questions. All right, I think we're up to date with all the questions in the chat. Are there any other questions that anyone has that is online with us? Alrighty, well, hearing none, I was gonna say we can have our team stay on just a few minutes longer, just in case anybody else joins us or pops in and has any additional questions. Otherwise, again, we're gonna be doing this at 1:00 p.m. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So there will be obviously other options if you have any additional questions as you're working through the application. We can get back to you. I see that one just popped up. Are there character limits on application narrative responses? There are certain ones that do have character limits based on the fact that the state has to provide those responses to NTIA in our final proposal, and there's a character limit on what we're allowed to apply or what we're allowed to submit to NTIA. And so in most cases, the narratives should generally give you ample space to answer the questions that are being asked. Anything that does have a character limit, though, it's because it's something that the state has a character limit when we're supposed to be submitting that information back to NTIA. Well, great. Well, thank you, everybody. We're going to have a couple of team members stay on for a few more minutes, just in case anybody has any additional questions. Otherwise, we will be at office hours at 1 p.m. tomorrow. Thank you.